Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Startup Series, a series where we address problems that startup founders face in their day-to-day running their startups. I'm Govind Kedia and I run Arctic Invent, which help companies increase their enterprise value by way of building business-centric IPR portfolio. My company, Arctic Invent, has been working with over 1,000 plus startups from Europe, US, and India, helping them build massive value on their product and technologies. Sorry about that. It's a special day, so of course it has to start with something special, right? So, uh, 10 years ago today, we began the journey to protect, innovate, and inspire through intellectual property. So, what better topic to bring to you today? One all about IP and IP portfolios. It is something every startup founder should have on their to-do list. The asset that keeps on giving the great equalizer for business, playing fields, and helping ideas to grow into empires. In today's talk, I have got Christian and Jana, who have been instrumental in building Arctic Invent as co-founders as well. Both Jana and Christian have worked in the areas of IP, built their own new ventures for more than 2 decades, and have helped many startups and companies to get value from their patents and also helping large multinational in the telecom, FMCG, medtech, gaming, and mobile apps. Today, we will learn from their experience on IP portfolios vis-a-vis to startup business success. We plan to keep this two-part episode dedicated to this topic. In the next part, we will take up startup series into the world of LinkedIn audio, where we will return to answer some of the questions that would arise today. And if we may not be answered it today, then we will do this LinkedIn audio as well. However, put down your question in comment section and we will take up in the question for sure. But let me introduce my first guest today, Yana, and I have been working for more than a decade now, and Yana understands both the world of invention and IP very well. He has been inventor in more than 200 plus patents while working with Nokia as a technology person. After that, Yana has been instrumental in aggregating patent portfolio, which was eventually sold to Apple. After that, Moosdoc was born, and in which is one of the leading firms from Finland and has been able to help unicorn startups and generated massive value by the way of IP for them. Welcome to the Startup Series, Yana. Would you like to add something more and add a bit more about your journey so far?
Thanks, Colin. It's a pleasure to be here. I can't believe it's already 10 years since we first started to do cooperation. You asked, would you like to add something more about the journey? So, what I've seen is actually a mind shift on the entrepreneurs of the startups. So, when we started, companies were like saying that I believe I can do it, but that has totally changed. Everybody looks in your eyes and said, I know I can do it. And that's a fundamental change. It's like a big change. And I like this attitude change from believing to knowing whether it's true or not. But
Okay,
that's a good
great.
start.
Great. Thanks, Anna, for adding that. And my second guest, Christian, who have been, known since when I started my career in IP, pretty much. Christian is chairman to Arctic Invent and Basque. He is European trademark attorney. Started his career as a patent attorney with our patent. Since then, he has been done many startups, built businesses in multiple countries. Also did a biotech startup as well. Welcome to the Startup Series, Christian. Would you like to add something about your journey? How has been for you so far?
Thank you so much for including me on this session today. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, congratulations everyone on 10 years building Arctic Invent and to make it one of the best IP boutiques in India and globally as well. It's been such an amazing thing to build a great team on that. Startups, I call myself a startup enthusiast because I work with so many amazing founders and inventors. So yeah, just a real pleasure to be here. We've supported hundreds of startups, hundreds of inventors. So yeah, and look forward to this session.
Great. So let's start with the basics first, right? So when we talk about IP, two things spring to the mind to the most of the people, right? Patents and trademarks. Now, could you please briefly explain how startups should look at it, how they protect the IP and help their business grow? Yana, you want to take it first?
Oh, I can definitely do that. I think there are two things in each of the company. One is this brand, what is your name and how you look and feel goes. So that goes in the brand protection, and that's covered by trademarks mainly. mainly. Then what comes to technology, then we are on the patents. So when you have some tech which you have developed or service you have developed, that's when the patents are way to go. So two different classes. You protect your brand with the trademarks, and then when you have really a technical innovation, then you go with the patents and trademarks both give this protection what you need to go forward with your business growth.
Sure. Great. Christian, your views, how do you recommend?
Yes, same thing. Just echoing what Jana says, it's about getting some assets in place, securing your IP, securing your value of your business. We've seen it so many times through different peaks and troughs of the economic cycle. So yeah, building an IP portfolio, looking at the value chain, looking at your business model, underpinning it all with IP. A lot of people talk about IP strategy, not many people do it well.
Okay, great. No, I think very, very interesting, about IP strategy. We'll definitely pick up in the later part of the conversation how we really build and talk about IP strategy. But to everybody tuned in, over the next few weeks, we will be going a bit deeper on the subject of different IP types, which Jana and Christian already built a bit, and how they apply in different businesses. And you can subscribe to our newsletter, IP Berry, and I'm sure we will definitely get you more and more comment, more and more knowledge around this topic. One of the major notion people have, I will keep it secret. What's the difference between patent and a trade secret, and when we should use either? So with your experience when working with so many tech companies and in the chemical companies and biotech companies, Christian, how do you really go and find out what is it that we should keep secret, what should we file for patent? Some people just say that, okay, I will keep it secret, otherwise everybody will copy. So how to really get out of this dilemma? Christian, you want to build first on this one?
Yeah, I think we do face that sometimes. People say keep it secret, but it's quite quickly when you start to talk about the value and is someone able to reverse engineer what you do? Do you want to tell the world about what you're doing? You've got to secure your IP. So very often we file patents. Sometimes we file multiple patents and different extents of disclosures in these patents. So sometimes you might file 2-3 different versions and then withdraw some of them to just make sure that what you're disclosing is what you want to disclose. Keep some secret source, of course, and then but you've got to get IP rights in place. It's important for investors. It's important for your innovation culture in the business as well.
Sure. Yeah, your take on secret versus patenting. How do you really help?
Yeah. So keeping stuff secret might sound like a great idea, but honestly speaking, pretty much everything is reverse engineerable, like Christian mentioned there. So if your product is good or service is good, there will be copycats who will try to copy it. Some of those will be successful on copying it. So it's not practical to keep stuff secret. You cannot do that, or it doesn't help actually, because somebody will find a way to do the same thing. And really, the only way to get real protection, something which you can enforce, is via filing a patents, getting like the registered rights to yourself. When you have those, then you can enforce it as well if somebody steals it. And people will steal it if it's good. If it's not good, then they don't steal it.
Okay, great. I think great analogy, and I think what my take, and when I discuss with startups in India, at least, my typical take on is that if you believe that your idea, like Yana has built, that if it is no way reverse engineerable like a Coke formula, and you believe that it's like you can keep it secret long enough, I think then probably trade secret conversation becomes relevant. Otherwise, in today's advanced technologies, it's very, very hard to kind of say that, okay, I will keep it secret and still it will still fly. So thank you for sharing that, Jana and Christian. Now, let's talk about one of the time. Most of the time, people talk about IP portfolio, as a term. So what exactly is IP portfolio in your view? Working with many companies, who got sold to billions of dollars eventually. Uh, could you without mentioning the names, if there was that's a problem, give us some examples of IP portfolios you have built over the past few years. Yeah, I know you have filed 200 patents as inventor with Nokia. So just give us some examples of the portfolio. What does it really means to have a IP portfolio in overall sense?
Yeah, so the term IP portfolio sounds very fancy, but it's actually bottom line. It's a list of stuff which you own, which you have registered. So it's very simple and tangible, actually, irrespective. It's like intangible rights. So it's a shortly, it's a briefly, it's a collection of items you own and control. So patent application, trademarks, designs, and everything. Important aspect when you build a portfolio, it's like sufficient coverage over what you are trying to do. Not always exactly the pinpointing the tech what you are doing, but also creating sort of a fuzzy cloud around that. So it makes it more difficult for people to copy your stuff.
Okay, great. Christian, your views on how do you look at IP portfolio as a whole, and how do you typically you work with companies who are not tech, mostly in the branding side as well. So how do you really help them from a trademark point of view as well? How do you really build a portfolio around different IP assets?
So yeah, like you say, we've got a variety of. We focus a lot on sustainability, digitalization, health tech, and lifestyle brands, basically. I often say when I start talking to the really early startups, so we probably mentor and advise, I think, 200 startups a year that are coming through the technology cluster here in Cambridge. And with those initial discussions, because it's never too early to start talking about IP, we often say, don't have all your eggs in one basket, right? So it's really important that you file a few different patents, trademarks, design rights, etc. And look at the value chain. Where do you find the value? I often say you need to have like 3 to 5 patent families. And similarly, I've got a standing order from US multinationals who say if you have patent families, 3 to 5 patent families that are relating to machine learning or AI, we'll buy them, right? Why do they say 3 to 5? Because if you go into litigation, you want to have more than one patent family. Quite often, maybe 2 of them will get invalidated. Like if you go into a fight, 1 might be easy to design around, and then you're left with 2 that you negotiate a deal with. And that's why you get your settlement, and that's why you sort of build value so that you can actually extract value as well from your competitors if needed.
Sure. So what you're saying is basically looking at the value in the business and then kind of building the portfolio around it, right? So like we started the conversation with the trademark and patents and designs, and so what essentially we are talking about is that okay, how to identify these relevant values or the value drivers in the company, so to say, in the startup, and then go after them, and very very relevant examples of having 3 4 families and so and so forth. So thank you Christian, and for doing that, saying that. Yeah, Christian, you were building on
I
something.
was going to add there, I think it's important to talk about trademarks as well. And I think this is relevant for all IP portfolios. Look a little bit at segmenting what you're doing. So if you've got some of the key brands, they should be filed in all of the main jurisdictions that you're at. Then some of the sub brands or ranges or services or product names, they might be better to just file them in some key jurisdictions, right? So with some of our larger clients, we have segmented the portfolio. We have got like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. We know we have a standard order to file the main trademarks in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. We make a decision. But similarly, we always work with clearance searches as well on trademark. We do a lot of that.
Sure.
I guess this is a very good point of view on this country strategy, etc. But I sort of actually, this opens eyes always that there are like 2 axes. One is that you want to have this handful of cases per technology or per feature of your product, and then you take those to handful of countries. You might want to do US, Europe, India, China, etc. Or for some inventions, you just go for Canada. You never know. But it's like that's how you build the portfolio. You make sure that there are variety of technologies covered and brand names covered, and then you look on the geographical scope on the other axis, and then you have a nice view there.
Sure, sure. So, Christian, I think there was one question which was on the different channel where we are broadcasting. How do you define a patent family? Of course, it's a standard answer. But question coming to for you, what do you mean by patent family when you talk about patent family in that ways, right?
I think in our world, we often get, and that's one of the problems with the IP industry, right? So a lot of old school ways of working is to be using this jargon, patent families, etc. But a patent family to me is one core invention, right? So one core invention is what I call a patent family. That can be branched internationally. That for me is like IP tactics almost. It's not really, your strategy is linked to that, but IP tactics is a big part of that. So one key invention. So if you have a product, you have a SaaS product, you might have a patent on the platform, for example. You might also have some really good security aspects or encoding, decoding of stuff. Then you file patents on that as well. So there you've got two patents and families, and then you build on that. I do think the world is changing. I think the old way of working of saying one patent family, file it in these countries, and then you're good to go is very much changing now, because we're working in such a fast-moving pace. You need to do your filings. You need to be actively prosecuting them as if your business model might change. And to do that cost effectively, you need to work with someone who really takes care of it for you. The last thing is to have the CEO working with IP details, right? You need to have set the strategy and together with your IP partner, get going on building.
Sure. No, great. Thanks, Christian, for building that up. No, as a startup founder, one of the major challenges, how do I identify IP potential in the startup, right? What's really the IP potential that I have, and how do I begin to put together an IP portfolio? So how do you typically, when you work with startup founders who are very early stage or somewhere, reached at a stage of seed capital, how do you really help them? What has been your experience working with them? And if you can share some practical tips around how they should be going about it, that would be really useful for the audience today. Jana, you want to pick up first?
Yeah. So a specific question was about
how to identify the IP potential, for the startups, and how do I, begin to put together an IP portfolio for the entire, company? How do I really do that?
I think it all starts from what you want to be when you grow up. I mean, as a company, as a company, and if your ambition level is high, then you have to really build this from plan this from the day -1. Actually, so from the timing perspective, patents particularly have this caveat that you have to do the patent filings before you publish your product. So when a startup starts to build their company, when you start to build your company, you have to look forward that, hey, in 36 months or 40 months or 12 months, I will be there. So you want to build a portfolio which serves that purpose when you get there. And that's important when you look on all of these building that, hey, should I do only domestic filings of the patents, but you actually have to look on this, your business plan, that what is the biggest market, and you go there and start building on that biggest cases. I think what people don't really realize always that if they are building a successful company which has a great products, then they need to protect that, because if you are successful, people will copy you. Mm-hmm. So rule of thumb, which is the word I hate a little bit, is that if you are planning to be company which is very successful with the great products, you have to protect that, but you have to do this protection before you know whether your product is great and whether you will be successful. If you, on the other hand, if you have a lousy product with no big plans, then you don't protect. But I think the main thing is that you have to do it. You have to start doing this before when you are still under radar. If you go in the event, trade show or webcast and explain everything about your technology and your roadmaps, then it's too late. You have to do it like right now, preferably yesterday, but it's very difficult to do it yesterday. So let's do it now. Start it today.
And similarly to that, if I jump in, then quite often I will say to people that you've got to have some insurance in place, right? So this is also, if you're taking investor money and they want to know that you take your IP seriously, people come and go. You'll have the engineers leave, you'll have scientists leave, but the company IP sits there and that has to be captured. It's a bit like buying a house but not putting house insurance in place, right? You can do it if you don't want to, it's fine, right? But the day the house burns up or there's a lightning strike, you would have liked to have insurance in place, right? Life insurance the same. If do you want to leave your family and kids behind? I don't think so, right? So it's really important that you take it seriously. It's an investment, but it's really valuable as well. We see many companies who are pivoting business models. If they don't have this IP, they cannot pivot in the same way. And then similarly, Anna and I have seen the successes when they're doing massive exits. Then it's, you get the order that all of our IP should be transferred and kept alive. And similarly, when some companies don't make it, what they do sell is the IP rights, right? And that can still be worth hundreds of thousands in themselves. Look at Nortel, for example. It's many years ago now, but it's big value in this IP.
Sure. No, great. Thank you for sharing that. And also one related question to this, identifying potential. Do you say that these potential also varies from industry to industry? Like, if I am a software or in sort of high tech semiconductor, or if I'm the med devices, the potential of IP changes. What has been your experiences working with the diverse clients? In UK and Finland and Europe. Have you seen any trends around these technology areas as such, or how do you really go about this conversation around it is relevant more in my industry or it is less relevant in my industry? So how you typically approach that conversation?
Christian, want to take it first?
Yeah, I would say 5-10 years ago there used to be more, maybe even longer, there used to be more of this defensive thinking, right? That I'll file some patents and then I protect myself if someone comes. Nowadays, it's much more value focused. And therefore, because it's more value focused and it's securing your rights and that the potential for a big success is massive. I'm seeing, in the old days, you might be able to say there are more telecom patents filed than life science patents, etc. But even so, life science patents, people really understand the value and they know they need to have them. So I would say that there's more, people are all understanding the value of filing patents nowadays. And therefore that difference between industries is somewhat, decreasing a little bit.
Sure. Great.
I have observed
Can I your take?
Yeah, I have made the same observation that patents used to be sort of like if you have mechanical stuff and that's it. We do something simple, but people are more educated. Investors are more educated on this subject. Entrepreneurs, they know what they are doing, so we can see that the importance of the IP is the relative importance for everybody is the same. So amounts might vary. So in some technologies, it's easier to file a massive amount of patents than others, but relative impact is now the same. So there is no, I don't see any fields of technology or businesses who would not consider patenting things.
Sure. No, great. And while I move to the next question, I also want to remind all the live users here to post their questions. and we will definitely pick up some of the questions in the end. Now, the next question, I think we talked about building the portfolios and building the IP very early stage of the business, right? Now, most of the most common notion that people have is that building an IP portfolio is a big investment. What's the recommendation to a startup with a limited resource? How can they build a solid portfolio? Can you share some example of of the startups who built portfolio on a budget? How did they do it? How did their journey went from bootstrapped company to then raising the funds and doing the IP? uh, so Jana, you want to kind of pick up some examples. I know Finland is a great hub for startup ecosystems. So what has been your learning around these conversations around investments on the IP?
Yeah, this all boils down to what you are actually building as an entrepreneur. Uh, typically, typically, if you have a product which is great, uh, you just have to get the financing to do the protection as well. And sort of like a logically, if you think about it, it does not make sense to start building something which you cannot protect. Worst case scenario is that you work for a long time bootstrapping with your own sweat there and building a product over the years, and then somebody comes and steals it, and just because you don't have money in the beginning to protect that. So I think you have to find financial resources to do that. Uh, reserve, for example, 5% to 10% of your R&D money to protect the work, depends where you are. Instead of it's not that of a big investment. It's like a 1 or 2 work days per month type of thing. But you have to sort of get the finances, or if you are able to get the finances to make the product, then you have finances to do the protection as well. I mean, how would you be able to do the product
And,
otherwise?
and similarly to that, it is a case where if you've got limited budget, you just got to work with what you've got, right? So you've got to identify then what's the key patents, what's the key trademarks that I'm filing, and file them. The first filing is never that expensive. It's a few £1,000 or pounds or dollars or euros. You just got to get it done, right? So that starts the clock. Then you've got, for patents, it's typically a year, but really 2.5, 3 years before the really bigger costs come. But that is when you start planning early. So you start finding partners that you're going to work with, investors. It might be that you find, okay, I'm going to be licensing in some of these other markets. There's some really interesting trends happening as well, where there will be people who will take and fund some of your IP internationally if that's what you want, right? I think it's a case of being selective, making sure you get it filed, work on a fixed fee with your partners, your IP attorneys, your patent attorneys. Okay, I've got this much, what can we do? Okay, we can probably do a small patent first filing. Boom, there you go, right? Investors like to see it. Then when you've raised your money, then we often get called in by the investors who say, look guys, can you help guide these founders to make sure that they're protecting what we've filed and what we've invested in.
Sure. No, that's of course. I think it becomes even more relevant. Especially as India ecosystem is, of course, startup ecosystem is also growing, and I think in some way, looking at the journey of 10 years, also I can see that it kind of mimics the way the early days of the European ecosystem was after the US ecosystem was matured. Then the Europe comes, and then now India is also kind of building on to that ecosystem of startups, deep tech startups. A lot of conversations are happening. Recently, India has announced its deep tech funding policy. So I do believe that it's going to be a very relevant conversation for a lot of deep tech founders, especially when they are bootstrapping and they're not really sure how to go about it. Now, one of the what are the some of the common mistakes startups make when they're starting to or while building IP portfolios? Would love to have some examples which you have seen in the past and some stories around some of these companies that you have worked with, or have seen either successful or gone in a different direction, some stories would really help our audience today. So, Christian or Yana, you want to, either of
I,
you can pick.
let me start, right? So in one of the biotech spin-outs that I did from University of Cambridge, we filed a lot of patent applications early on, right? And they weren't done in the best possible way. So when you get someone on board who knows and understands IP a bit better, you realize you need to sort of slim down some of these patents, and you need to start getting almost a fail early, fail cheap input, right? So doing some searching, patentability searching is really valuable. Getting the searches back from the patent offices, and before you're sort of spending big money on something that's already been done before, right? It's really basic, right? It's a little bit of homework is important. That said, we can also, we've got very high grant rates when we're working with patents. I think it's like 54% of US patent files get granted. We're running at sort of 70 plus, and Jana will say 100 plus because we know the game, right? But it's really important. So in the old days, probably a good 10 years ago, I often saw founders trying to draft patents themselves. I don't see that so often anymore. And I think that's from almost like Jana said at the start. You've seen this shift in like, I think I can do it, to no, I can do it. Because you've seen so many successes around you now, both in Finland or in Cambridge or in Sweden or in Central Europe, right? So therefore there is an understanding that the CEO or the CTO should be out, building product, selling product, getting revenues, getting partnerships going. They shouldn't be sitting there trying to draft a patent. Sometimes they still believe they can, and I joke with some of the founders, and I say, I'm happy to make you a trainee patent attorney, just because you filed 2 trademarks late at night when you thought of a nice trademark name doesn't mean that that's the best approach.
Sure. Yana, your take on this?
Yes, I think there's this one company who they had like a really great product. I mean, this inventor, they came to our office and explained how they have done it, and it's like brilliant. And I said, hey, can you provide me a little bit more information? And, yeah, absolutely. And this person sends me a YouTube link. And can you see how many great comments I have received? Over 1,000 views, 100 comments on great invention. I said, well, that's problematic because the patents, you have to file a patent before you publish it. I think that's like a fundamental thing that, as Christian said, that do something. If you don't have money to file a 100-page paper, ask your attorney to write one pager. The attorney will probably do it a little bit less expensive, but do something at least. But to put it in the YouTube and getting lots of impressions, nice from social media point of view. But for patenting, I think that's the biggest mistake what you can do, that you publish it before you file the patent, because then it's too late.
Sure. No, I think that's very relevant, Yana. And also one question which is again in context of the IP portfolio comes that there are like millions and billions of patents, and what we have done is anyways a very very small contribution to the existing knowledge. So I don't know whether I'll be able to enforce it, whether it will make sense to really stop somebody. These conversation comes in. Christian also briefly talked about infringing on others and so forth. And I think that becomes sometimes a big roadblock for startup founders to say and think that okay, IP is relevant for them because they believe that it's not enforceable. It is not something that I have done something that is going to make a big dent. So how to really go out of this conversation in terms of how to really make a conversation which is relevant for the startup pitch as well. And also investors usually say this as well, that when startup founder goes and says that hey, look, we have patents, and then they kind of come back and say hey, there are thousands and thousands of patents out there. What is real value that you bring on the table? And probably you have not invented something great. So how really startup founders should use that use this their own IP assets to counter these conversations as well. So how would you navigate these situations for yourself?
I guess one thing there is that value of something is always bigger than value of nothing. So it's like a mathematically not feasible statement that value of my patent would be zero or less, because it always brings something on the table. I think it also demonstrates that at least your organization or team is capable of systematically documenting something if you are able to express yourself enough to write the patent application and file it in the system. Then you have it there. Then it's like a question. Somebody might say that, hey, well, I don't want to do that because enforcement, that's very expensive. You go to litigation, it costs you millions. But normally these startups, when you hear what they say that in 3 years' time, I will be 100 million company or billion or 10 billion euro company, whatever is the number. And then 30 seconds later, they say, well, but this patent in this official fees, it's 300 euros. I said, there's a little bit mismatch on this one. So it's like you are always preparing for the success. That's what we are trying to always say, that you are preparing for the success. You have to have all the possible tools. Why would you leave one possible item away from your assets? Because you are doing anything, all kind of things. So why not do this one?
Another trend that I'm seeing, so having now been working with startups for 20 plus years, when the first time I looked at IP insurance, I think I was doing a clean tech startup at the time, it was a paper tiger, right? It really did not validate the money you would spend. I think back then it was £5,000 per patent per jurisdiction, with lots of disclaimers for prior art and other competitors' patents. Nowadays, it's pretty good, right? You can actually get good defensive and offensive patent insurance in place. Of course, again, you need to do this before you have the flooding of your house, right? So you need to be putting this in place. But it's these sort of things, when you're racing, I wouldn't say pre-seed, but I would say when you're racing a seed round, if it's 2 million, whatever it is in a seed round, you should put these things in place, or at least be talking about it, putting it into your IP strategy so that you can show that you've got a plan in place here. But okay, I understand this could be litigious, but let's do this. In the old days, I used to see patents selling maybe a small percentage of their equity to a big multinational to know that they had an 800-pound gorilla in their corner. But things are moving so fast now. People don't do that, and they shouldn't have to do that. Getting a good, decent investor involved, someone who really understands how to get you to the market and to scale, that's gold, right? And the good investments will always get back. It's just a fact.
Sure. No, thanks for sharing that. I think very relevant. I think, and I liked the way you said that, it's always preparing for the success. I think if you are preparing for the failure, then the failure will happen. It's like a universal, also like a spiritual thing as well, right? That if you're preparing for failure, then failure is bound to happen. So, it's a bit of a spiritual, talk as well. Looks like that. Thank you for saying that. Now, maintaining the portfolio, I think, most of the time, most of the startup founder overlook, just file something at the early stage, then forgot about it. So, what are the top 3 things according to each of you the startup should do to maintain their portfolios? What are the regular activities that founders should be involved in, or they should be doing on a day-to-day basis? Yeah, Yana, you want to pick up
Yeah,
from?
I could do. Well, I read this word maintaining as how to build or update that. It's not really a portfolio when you have like one invention yet. But I think companies should keep their eyes open all the time and keep the barrier down on starting to patenting, or keep the barrier down of accepting to yourself what is the invention and what is not the invention. Practical tip for companies would be like keeping somewhere a list, put it in the drive or wherever, and ask people to write down always when they have an idea, whether it's a crazy idea or not. Let's not worry about that. The important thing is that you get this inventory of the inventions or possible ideas which you might be able to protect. And then when you have an inventory of cases, then you can prioritize those and start building the portfolio. And then the portfolio will grow on that way where depending on the prioritization all the time. But keep the barrier low, mental barrier particularly. Your inventions are great. You just think that they are not great because you have been working on that field forever, but you have to compare with the other people. Other people don't know anything about that.
Sure.
And
Great.
similarly to that, I think when you talk about startups, quite often the founder or CEO, he or she is the first person who takes this on board. They're doing all of the work. They're the main contact, but at some point their capacity will be needed and somewhere else. So quite often it's important to get someone else in the business, be that transfer to the CTO, transfer to an innovation manager, transfer it to your general counsel, just to make sure that things are kept under working clocking along. So I think that's really important. Make sure that there's someone internally who's responsible for this. Regularly review your IP. Keep it lean and mean, and then expand and be ready for the acceleration when that happens. And then, like Jana says, capture your IP.
Sure. Oh, great. Thank you for sharing that. And I think one of the most common question that I get to hear from, especially from a lot of founders who are building a bit of late stage when they have more than 20 people team of researchers, that, how to build the IP culture, how to funnel these ideas. Jana, of course, you mentioned about, inventory of the ideas, and I think that's very, very great suggestion. You worked in Nokia, you have been inventorying 200 patents. I mean, how startup should be really going about building an IP culture? I mean, especially when the engineers are day to day working on new ideas, new problems to solve. My take always personally has been to focus on 3 R's, which is responsibility. Put it in their KRAs and reward them and recognize them. I'm sure you have been also, in the past careers of yours, been part of such teams where you are the inventors. So, what are your recommendation on the ground? How to build this entire culture of IP in that ways, helping companies to really get the ideas in place, IDFs filled on time. I think that becomes a bit of bottleneck when it goes to work with sometimes with the firms and attorney firms and so on and so forth. So how do you navigate and help your startups with these questions?
I guess the main thing there is that the CEO of the company who has the responsibility on the end of the day, or the founders, that the team who's working there understands that IP is one of the foundations of that company for the valuation. That it's not something that people must do. It's not, patenting is not something you have to tolerate. It's a part of the thing. You're developing a product, making a software, doing that. But part of that job is to secure that company is able to create value also in the future. It builds something which goes in the balance sheet. Totally differently than making the code now and leaving after 5 o'clock home. But it's a key foundation. It's not that, hey, you have to fill in these invention reports once in a while. But and that's difficult. It's not easy job. But some people are very good on motivating people to do it. There's probably some magic on these people then, more than I don't know.
So yeah, Christian, what's your take on this? How you recommend building the innovation culture in startups? How do you suggest that?
I think you've got to give recognition. You've got to celebrate success. Right? You've got to really celebrate success. You've got to. Jana does it very well. We do the same. When you get granted patents, you go and celebrate with the inventors and with the people, so that happens. Similarly, the more successful you get, the more people will come for you. So you will have cease and desist letters. You will have people trying to, especially incumbents, bigger companies trying to sue you. It was, I like the quote from Tony Fadell in the book Build recently that I read, that they celebrated them when they got sued. When he's the founder of Nest, when they got sued by Honeywell, right? Because they knew that they were doing something good, right? So you've got to recognize the success. You've got to make sure people are given credit, and maybe create a bit of competition internally as well, so that brings out the best performance.
Yeah, great. No, I think competition is a great idea. I think creating some sort of internal competition, not to a point that it becomes a problem, but it's a great idea. So now we have a question from Alexandra. Inventory of ideas sounds great, but how to secure ownership of these ideas to company in case some of the employees are subcontractors, so not salary workers? Any easy solution for this? And any recommendation for tools for using idea inventory, or in general tools for handling innovation process management? So any suggestions on how to handle ideas from non-employees or contractors, and what tools would you recommend to do that?
First one is easy. How to handle this? How to secure the ownership? Just make this paperwork in a proper manner. If you ask your attorney, simple assignment papers, a chain of ownership, not the handshake, but handshake is also important, but more important is that paperwork, that the inventor transfers that to his or her employee, and that transfers that. So subcontractor will then eventually transfer the IP to the company who is filing it.
Yeah. So
And any tools recommendation that you would recommend?
Well, I would say facts. No, it's just like, there's no special tools needed on that one. If there's a invention disclosure done, you move it in the same way than you move any other documentation, and then you get the signatures on the papers, and that's it.
I think adding to Jana there, your employment contract should cover it. If it's a consultant, then you make sure in the consultancy agreement that you have that the IP rights belong to you. Some of the consultancies who've been very successful doing product development around Cambridge, UK, for example, they have the right to commercialize this in other areas. You've got to be a bit tough as well when you're negotiating with, say, a partner and being a multinational. So like Jana says, that's mechanics, right? That's good housekeeping at least. On the tools, yes, start off with We shared drives, some Dropboxes, some Google Docs, whatever you're working on, so that you're capturing stuff. We do a lot of innovation workshops that is still driven by asking questions and getting the right people in a Zoom call or in the same room. You have got quite a lot of different tools in the market as well when it comes to more of the patent landscaping, these sort of things. We, of course, have a sister company, Alban, that does Alban Analytics. That is very good for mapping out what are the trends and happening in a certain space, and that can help you as well when you're starting to position and start with some of your ideation sessions, etc.
Sure.
Alexandra can reach out later if she wants. Happy to make some suggestions.
Sure. Thanks, Alexandra. I think we'll move forward. I'll also reply some of the questions, some of the tools that I know can help you for sure. After the live, I'll definitely share some ideas. Now, I think one of the most common thing that we hear from a lot of software and AI companies. Jana, I know your views has been always everything can be patented. Can you give some examples and also include some bit of European perspective, because a lot of the times people say that, hey, European standards on software is a gold standard, which is applicable in India as well to some extent, a lot of the extent. So can you give some examples on how to really approach patenting in the AI and software? And can you build on your thesis of everything can be patented a bit more?
Thanks for the challenge. I think the starting point there is, like in all of these patents, that you will get the patent if you are solving a technical problem. And I think this applies to software, and AI is one example of the software. It's a nice acronym which says that I have done a statistical analysis tool with the software, the AI. But the starting point is that if there's a technical problem you are solving, then you will get the patent on that if your solution for that is new and inventive. And there are nice examples of getting patents for something which goes in the category of AI, but those all have the common thing that for example, inventor has developed a new type of algorithm, new way to cluster the data, new way to train the AI compared to old ways. So they are really solving a problem, and then you get these patents on AI. And as easy as that, if you are solving a real world problem, you will get the patent for that. If you are the first one to propose that solution, don't be a
Great.
copycat.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Thanks. So, Christian, for you, I have a different question. We are, of course, fairly global markets now. And world is our marketplace now. I think a lot of Indian companies, European companies have been always going for, high growth markets or have been doing business in multiple places. And one of the most common, of course, notion has been, worldwide IP protection. And sometimes it gets also confusing with some of the things like PCT applications and so on and so forth, right? So what's how do you recommend on the global rights? I think that's one of the theme that we also want to touch upon today, is that what really should go in thinking about global, what's global means in the IP context, how startup founders should look at the globalization of their own IP portfolios. Some of the myths you can also want to you want to bust. Please go ahead and do it.
Yeah, when I started in this game a long time ago, the trifecta was really, your home market. Of course, you did your first filing there, ideally so that you can, get a feel or do some patentability searches. Then you would file US, Europe, and Japan. That was what was always happening. But nowadays, it's really US, Europe, and China, and India is coming. We of course see a lot of activity in India, and I'm super excited about the potential of the Indian market as well. And the Indian startups, them looking at the US. I think the other myth buster we should put out there is saying there's no such thing as a global patent, right? You basically pick and choose. You can file a PCT application, and many startups do that to maintain the patent pending globally for up to like 2.5 years. From when you first file, and like Jana has touched upon before, and even you go in, it's quite cost effective. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get your first patent filed and then a PCT application filed after that, and it just keeps the options open. Then you go ahead and you file, and if we talked about it, the segmentation of your inventions. What is the gold one, the best one should be filed in all of the jurisdictions where you're active. Then think in the medium to long term as well. Will you have some licensing partner in other jurisdictions and therefore file them there as well? But you have to always be thinking and planning ahead.
Sure. No, great. Thank you, Krishna, for saying that. So, Yana, what would be your 3 recommendation you give to startups who are planning to take their portfolio global?
Globally, they already have the answer there where they should file the patents. When they look on their Excel, which shows country breakup, that where is the business, it's typically this pie chart which has country X, Y, and then others. So go at least to this country X and Y, which are like a stereotypic pie chart is 30% for US, 27% Europe, and then rest of the world. So do at least this US and Europe in that situation. Of course, the pie chart, they look different from all the companies. And that's like why not to do that at least? But so they know already where their business is going to be, so they should protect at least there. There are other places as well, but at least there.
Great. I think very, very important insight to all the listeners that always IP will always follow the business, right? Not the other way around. At least in the startup world, that it has to be looked where the business is going to be and what's the vision of the company and the startup, right? So thanks Anna for sharing that. Now it is the time, we are almost to the end, so if there are any questions, it's the time. I would like to request all the audience who are on the live to present now, because as we are on the on always on almost on the end of our episode. But before we close our episode today, let's take a kind of a real startup situation which happens. And I also want you to put a founder's hat on now with the IP. Is that, let's say, if a startup or founder has an idea and they think that it's going to disrupt the status quo of the industry, and going to be tremendously useful and profitable, and they have decided to dip their toes into the startup world, how and what should be their next step? So if you not only in IP question, from your startups, learnings and journeys you have seen and yourself, what would be your cheat sheet, so to say, in this situation? Christian, you want to pick it first?
I think it's very important to, you've got to, a lot of people who have done it before are, worked in corporates, etc. They've got the routines in place. But as a startup, as a founder, don't be afraid of IP. It is not a black box. It's not super complicated. It's, work with the right people and it becomes mechanics, right? But you've got to start to put things in writing. You've got to sort of write it down and document it, and then you go to the experts and get these things filed and patented, right? It adds value to your business, both in exits and in wind-ups later on. But I've seen so many cases as well where people think shorts in the short term and then they drop, especially US patents. You should really try to keep them alive, because 5 years later, this patent could be super valuable. We've got a few of those cases, even in crypto and other areas where those rights should have been kept.
Sure, thanks. Yana, your cheat sheet of how startup founders should really go about, picking one idea to making it to a, say, a
Yes,
unicorn or a billion dollar company.
I
What would
agree
you
with
say?
Christian said. You just have to start to do that. It's like don't fantasize in your working desk or whatever. Just start doing step by step. One item at a time. And for what comes to IP, give a call to your trusted attorney now and explain what you are trying to achieve. I think that's the thing. Don't go there and ask for, hey, can you do me this thing? Because then they will do that thing, but that thing might not take you where you want to be. So instead of going there to your attorney firm with a specific task, go there and ask, I would like to ensure that my product is protected in this market, instead of going that, hey, can you do me a filing of this type there? Because it's like it leads to the better situation. You might end up doing what you were thinking, but that will give you also confidence that, hey, what you were thinking was the same as an expert opinion without knowing what you were thinking. Don't talk about the tools, talk about where you want to be when you grow up. Then good attorney is able to help you with the right set of tools and steps. And then it will be easy. Only success.
Great. No, thanks for Yana for sharing that. I think very very important that IP is a function of. I always believed is a function of technology, business, and law, and I think that's what is coming, and what I can guess what we are trying to say, that it's always not only like a legal paperwork. It also has to be that, okay, I want a certain outcome than the output in that ways, right? So thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Jan and Christian, for being here today. It, of course, a great occasion for us today at Arctic Invent and giving our audience a lot to think about. I truly appreciate, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
To all our audience, thank you for once again for all your support. If you have any questions, DM direct message to Christian or Yana or to me. I'll be more than happy to take it. We are going to take up second part of this conversation as a LinkedIn audio, maybe in the next month, and I'm sure we will have more conversations on this topic where we can have more conversational and can pick up your personal pick up your questions around your business. Uh, Before I close, wish you a very happy Independence Day to all the audience joining from India. And don't forget to follow Arctic Invent company page and subscribe to our newsletters, IP Berry. And we are going to cover more and more topics around IP and business and startups, and which is going to be very, very useful for you to subscribe. Uh, of course, you can follow Christian and Anna on their LinkedIn and connect with them for any questions around IP or European laws on patents and so on and so forth. Remember to the look out for the day for the next event. We are going to probably do the next one more in this month. So I look forward to have you here. And thank you and see you at the next event.